Um, well, I'm Patty Isaac Hansen, and in 2017, I started getting involved in the environment and that sort of thing. And I did a lot of research. And in Newcastle, I live in the city of Newcastle, here in Delaware. And so I started up an initiative to try to go to zero waste. And I've like a thorn in the side to the city council and everybody actually. So, but I was able to set up a compost bin area, which I'll discuss later. But now we're going to let Brenda, whom I've read about and read a lot of information that she's published. And I think we're real excited to have today's guest and to have this. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Brenda and we'll get started. And I guess we're going to try to hold the questions till the end of her presentation.
Thanks, Patty. Bridget, I didn't know whether you wanted to share the poll results before I get started.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I will share them again. Hang on.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I just can't see it because I'm sharing my screen.
Can you see them now? So just to kind of give a brief summary, one person said that they took their food scraps to a offsite. 4 people said that they have composting on site at their house, and 4 people said that they've never composted but know a little bit about it. 8 people said that if they had a community drop-off site, they would use it.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that, since I could not see it since I'm sharing my screen. So I appreciate that. So as Patty said, I'm Brenda Platt, and I can talk composting all day. So I have drunk the Kool-Aid, and I'm not going to be talking about how to compost today, but just more what it is for those of you who maybe aren't as familiar, and the benefits and why scale matters to kind of promote home composting and community scale. So I just want to say a word about the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. We're a national nonprofit. Check out our website at ilsr.org. And we work in a lot of different key sectors. Our mission is really promoting homegrown economies. We have a big anti-Amazon campaign, which Amazon, has been making record profits during the pandemic and putting a lot of small businesses. So this is the holiday season. Support your local businesses. My little plug for that. But we work on community solar. We are doing community broadband. We have a lot of other initiatives. I'm in the Composting for Community initiative. I've been with the Institute 35 years this year. And I've done a lot of work fighting landfills and incinerators, but more recently have been almost entirely focused on composting and have issued a number of reports. These are some of them, and some of them are focused on community composting, like Community Composting Done Right. That's a guide to best management practices. And a few years before that, we put out this guide to community composting. And we have another one for those of you involved in schools, composting on site at schools. And if you want to be working, Patty, with Newcastle or other communities, we have a guide for local governments and how to promote home composting. So check out those resources. The other thing I forgot to say, just a word about myself, was I am a trained composter. I've been licensed in Maryland a couple of times to operate large scale facilities. But I have spent many summers in Delaware at Rehoboth. So care a lot about plastics free Delaware being, my experience with Delaware, mostly on the beach, and have rented the same beach house for 20 years. So, and always just shocked at the lack of just so much single use products and lack of composting. And oh my gosh, for the 2 weeks we're there, I collect all the food scraps and have to carry them home, much to the chagrin of my family. Really, Mom? Do you have to? Yes, we have to. So it would be nice to set up drop-offs and make it easier everywhere in Delaware, right? So one of the things we've been doing is in the composting work, we have been really trying to cultivate community composting, and we do that through a training program I'm going to talk about. We also have a podcast, we have a coalition, we have guides, we do policy resources, And so we're available to do that. We have a whole series of recorded webinars from how to prevent rats at community scaled sites. And we'll be doing a guide to entity structures, bokashi, bike powered food scrap collection. So those are all available for you to check out. And we have a new series we're in the middle of doing right now. Just yesterday we had this one, and it's on farm composting and how to use compost on farms. So there's a lot of potential obviously in Delaware to do that too. So today what I'm going to cover in the next few minutes is what and why about composting in general, and in particular community composting. I'm going to share with you photos mostly, and then the importance of training, whether it's home composting or community scale, because nothing like, you know, rats or odors or poor quality compost is going to doom community, you know, scale composting. So that's why, you know, we're trying to elevate best management practices. And I'll just share some stories and then what you can do if you're interested in supporting this. So just so we're all on the same page, what is compost? Well, compost is, I like to call it black gold. That's my hands holding up my homemade compost. And that youth in the top photos in a community garden we're working with in Baltimore. He's adding compost to the garden. But compost is not soil, it's a soil amendment, and it has many benefits. It's basically created through a biological process, and it's full of living beneficial microorganisms and has so many benefits. So just to kind of highlight what some of those benefits are, this is a graphic we put together for Earth Day, kind of listing some of those. But one of the ones that's pretty obvious, and probably to you guys with Plastic Free Delaware, is just the waste reduction aspects of compost. And this is based on US EPA figures, but based on what is still being disposed after recycling, after yard waste composting nationally, 1/5 of what we put out the curb every week as municipal trash is food scraps alone. And then when you add the yard trimmings, clean wood waste, perhaps some food soil paper, you know, almost or more than half of typical municipal garbage is readily compostable. Another driver, which is a huge driver, I think the most important driver for compost, is it's the benefits to healthy soils. So Linda, I know you noticed, you noted at the beginning you're becoming a master gardener, so you probably know all about the benefits of adding organic matter to soil. But one of the, you know, it improves cation exchange capacity, the ability of soils to store nutrients and exchange them. It helps the water holding capacity of soil. So if we're under drought conditions, could be the difference between having a tomato plant survive or a crop survive if you're a farmer or not. And then in big stormwater conditions, it helps prevent soil erosion and stormwater runoff. So so many benefits to composting. Over the years, I've done numerous studies on comparing jobs through burning or landfilling trash compared to recycling, reuse, repair, and composting. And these numbers are based on more commercial compost sites, not community scale. We're getting ready to update this with kind of a lens of looking at community scale. But what this shows is for every 10,000 tons flowing to an incinerator, you may have one job. For landfilling, maybe two. But when you're making compost at commercial sites, you're creating 4 times the number of jobs on a per ton basis. But because it's not a linear flow, you know, we're not destroying those materials, you're actually producing a product, you create more jobs when you're using it. And just an example, in green infrastructure, which is using compost, is one of the biggest growing markets for compost. So of course you use compost for agriculture and gardening, but using compost to help prevent soil erosion and mitigate stormwater runoff is one of the biggest growing markets. This is a compost blanket on a steep highway embankment before and after. So green infrastructure, it's like vegetative, right? Rather than like concrete and culverts. So this is a stream bed restoration with the compost blown into socks. Anyway, this gives you an idea. These are the jobs. So there is not only 4 times more jobs per ton compared to disposal, but when you use that compost for green infrastructure like rain gardens and bioswales and these vegetative retaining walls, it's an additional 6 times more jobs through composting. So that's just something to note. And then the compost benefits will just blow you out of the water. I mean, when you send food scraps to landfill, it's methane, which is highly potent greenhouse gas. But when you put it in the soil, convert food scraps to compost, you're creating a carbon sink. So it's a win-win for the climate. This is the Baltimore incinerator. So you can just kind of visually see, are we going to put our food scraps and organics up in smoke or ruin them in a landfill, or are we going to create this black gold and put it to grow healthy soil and grow food, right? And build more food systems that are more resilient. We also did a series of webinars on the compost climate connections that are available for free on our website, and they're pretty amazing. All right, so now let's just get into composting. And one of the things I absolutely love about composting is that it's can be small scale and large scale, and literally like everything in between. You can have the bin in your backyard, you could have a worm bin in a classroom, and you could have big industrial sites. There's these are kind of more farm scale systems here. No matter what you're doing, I will just emphasize that composting is an aerobic process, meaning it needs oxygen. So when you hear about compost smelling, it's usually because it's gone anaerobic and there's not enough oxygen in the pile. So all of these pictures, there's one way or another, they're turning the pile or getting oxygen in. Here's a farmer in Virginia that's horse manure, and they're blowing the air in with this blower. So just something to be aware of. But here's just some other pictures of different sizes. This is on a big building in Brooklyn, New York, which has an urban farm on the top, solar powered blowers. This is a middle school in Southeast DC that's got an in-vessel system. And there's another school. This is a urban farm in Brooklyn, New York, also has blowers underneath these piles you can't see. But one of the things I love about composting is that it can be rooted in community, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. But first, I just want to share that this is a hierarchy, that graphic that we created that kind of shows, most preferred strategies over least preferred. So, at the top you have source reduction. Of course, you want to prevent waste, right? So don't, let's not have all this unnecessary waste. Then we want to rescue, in the case of food, if it's edible, to feed people, and in some cases, livestock, chickens and pigs and whatnot. But then after that, we have this lens of scale. Like, our community should be promoting home composting that will actually save taxpayer money, because one of the biggest costs of any municipal budget is collecting trash. So if you're not collecting, 1/5 of the food scraps because people are handling it home, and you add on top of that their yard trimmings, that's a huge savings. And then promoting small scale decentralized, keeping it local, right? And then medium scale, locally based, that could be kind of larger scale farms. But really last is centralized composting, or anaerobic digestion is another biological process we're not really talking about today. And then mixed waste, well, for God forbid, Delaware does that. I think there's some history there. And then last is really landfilling and incineration. So how is Delaware doing? Well, some of you may be familiar with the history of the failure of the large scale Wilmington compost facility. And if anybody's interested in learning more about that, we did do an article when that closed about 7 years ago. Can't believe it's been that long, but that went through some of the reasons. So you can check, invite you to check out that article. So I think it's kind of important, the history, but I think it probably underscores for Delaware the need for locally based and diverse composting infrastructure, which is one of the reasons we wrote that article. The other thing I understand is that Delaware does not have exemptions in their permitting rules for compost sites that allow for small scale composting and on-farm composting. Now, I may be wrong about that, but we've been just having a recent dialogue in the last few days about this. So we can talk more about this, but one thing I just want to share is this is from our website. We've been documenting what other states are doing, and Maryland has a pretty good, might be a really good example to look at with the exemptions. And we're actually having a bill being introduced in our next legislative session that would expand the footprint that farmers can compost on, to allow them to do more. But I think Delaware might want to look at some of those examples to make it easier to compost on a small scale. So I just wanted to say that where I'm working on, I'm going to talk today just a little bit, show you pictures of home composting and community scale. And I just want to say I do a lot of training on home composting. I absolutely love doing it. I just finished in DC doing the compost course for the Master Gardener program in DC, and we'll be continuing to do that next year. I've done it in Montgomery County, Maryland too. But within home composting alone, there's many options. I'll just point to that report again I have. So just if anybody's interested in having us do a workshop, I love it. So, and one of the things I just like to share is if you're working with your local government and you do look at that report, one of the case studies we did is Orlando. And I just love Orlando's because they did this amazing campaign. I just think they called it Get Dirty, and it was Get Dirty for Valentine's Day when they launched it. So it was like, get dirty with your Valentine. And as a result of that campaign being kind of like so intriguing, they got a lot of free press, and they, delivered thousands of bins, and then they expanded it later where it was like, get dirty with your neighbors. So maybe not the best campaign for schools and youth, but it was very effective. And so anyway, just to kind of underscore the point to think outside the box and be creative, and there's no one way to do any of this. So for small scale decentralized, I just want to say, like, what is that? How do you define community composting? And one of the things that this is the definition that's in this guide we did a few years ago, but really it's kind of like this radical or not so radical notion that you're using compost within the same community from which the materials are generated. So you're kind of keeping it local. And this is a graphic we produced to kind of illustrate this. There's by the way, more than 24 enterprises that are collecting food scraps on bikes. So this is not, beyond the pale here. But generally, you have a community farm or garden, could be at a school, could be, anywhere in the community, and you're harvesting, you're using it, you have the food scraps, it's collected either on volunteer basis, maybe there's an enterprise doing it or drop-off program, and the composting is taking place on a scale at that site, and that's the loop. So you're using that organics, producing that black gold right within your local community. And we have produced a few videos, one's 2 minutes, one's 7 minutes, so you can check out those videos. I'm not going to show them now. The other thing we have is we have a composting for community map, and it does cover some state and local policies, including these compost site permitting exemptions. But we also are mapping community composters, so you could see all of them, or you could click on, the bike haulers and just get the bike haulers, which are these more purple teardrops on the map. And we're still building out the schools, so if you click on schools, there's probably not that many yet, but we're building that out. Love to begin to add Delaware. So I just want to kind of go through some of the benefits of community composting and show you some slides just to kind of wrap this up. But one of the benefits, as I said, is closing the loop locally. This is EcoCity Farms in Maryland, an amazing site, and this is actually worm composting. They do hot composting too. Here's their blowers. Blowers are powered by a solar array, but they're growing food to feed people in a place that has issues with food accessibility. One of the other benefits is community engagement, right? This is in a church community in Southeast DC, and Xavier Brown went through our composting program, and he's he's not only growing hot peppers in the compost, but he's producing pepper sauce, so they're selling it. He's doing youth engagement, get kids off the street and into enterprise development. People come, this is Howard University Community Garden, volunteers coming together for common work, building that social fabric of the community. This is one of the members of our community composting coalition, community composter coalition. This is actually in Canada, but I love their co-food Vancouver, where it's like we're building a community with shared values, and there's music and people coming together. So there's just so much that can happen, you know, on building kind of that community engagement and building composting into activities of farming. This is just an example of a church that we worked with, where it doesn't have to be a complicated system. We set up a series of home composting bins. This, by the way, is hardware cloth underneath it to prevent any thought, the perception that rodents are going to be an issue. And then we did training and set them to try to, you know, set them up for success. Here we're chopping some food scraps, as you can see. And then, you know, community skill building and job readiness. These are youth in Baltimore building a bin. They'd never even picked up a tool before. We're building a screener here, youth, bringing the community together for these events. This one is obviously pre-COVID. In a lot of these areas, you know, engaging underserved communities and populations. EcoCity Farms is in a food desert. I mentioned them before. Strength to Love Farm is a farm we're working with in Baltimore, where they're hiring to work at the farm citizens returning from incarceration, but they didn't have any composting as part of their urban farm. So we did a training. Here we're practicing making a pile in their bin. And I just think one of the best things about doing it locally is youth engagement. I cannot say enough about this. This is the thing I'm most inspired to work on, is training and setting up programs, outdoor education, which is what we need now in COVID times, even more than before. Kids being outside, doing this work, getting the connection between food and soil and climate protection. So this is Marvin Hayes, who runs the Baltimore Compost Collective, and this is what he's all about, is engaging youth. And once you have a site, then it becomes a place where youth school groups can come and take tours and get exposed to the wonder of composting. So having some of these demonstration sites, even for education training purposes, is really, I think, just critical. And then, you know, harnessing the power of volunteerism. It's just so fabulous. We have so many examples of this all across the country. This is an Eagle Scout project I worked with in Montgomery County, Maryland, just outside of DC. And it's at the Audubon Naturalist Society Woodend Sanctuary, but they have a youth learning garden and they have summer camps and after school programs. So we, you know, Eagle Scout built this project. They even I wanted a gravel pad under it. And so we're going to be doing the training to get that program started in the spring. And then just to emphasize how important volunteers are and just making sure they're trained, because we want to do this in a way that we have successful projects. And the New York Compost Project probably is the best city at this. They've been running their master composter certificate program for probably 20 years and have trained thousands of people that become their ambassadors for for more citywide, countywide, statewide composting efforts. So we launched our composter training program, I think back in 2014. We've replicated in Philadelphia. Here's a class where turning a pile. We've replicated in Philadelphia. We're now replicating it in Detroit. But I just want to end with some photos of what our graduates are doing. Jeffrey Neal is started the Howard University Composting Community Garden. He's working at the farm at Kelly Miller. It's middle school. He's training other people. He's now working with cafes and coffee shops, and he's now doing this full time as a business. So that's quite amazing. In Greenbelt, Beth Lamont went through our training, and she's got a few of these hot composting sites started, all volunteer based with the Zero Waste Circle. One group is the Hots. They do the hot composting, and the other volunteer group is the Wigglers, and they do the worm composting. And they've got these 3 bins on the loading dock of a local restaurant. And so that's a really cool project. And then Hidden Harvest Community Garden in Baltimore is another one we set up with the bin on a gravel pad. And it really is a hidden harvest within Baltimore, you can see here. And it's all volunteer based, and they have food scrap drop off for the neighborhood every Saturday morning, like 9 to 11. And there's a group, members of the compost cooperative, who are in charge of doing the composting. Here's 2 of their volunteers mixing a bin. Oh, and you can just see it's not done yet, but look, it's well on its way to becoming black gold there for their growing there. So, oh, did I just skip ahead? Okay, so Key City Compost, another graduate of Phil Westcott. He graduated and he's running a business in Frederick, Maryland, more of a rural area. This bin, they've totally outgrown this. They're not doing that small bin anymore, but you can see they have bigger bins for restaurants and smaller bins. So when you do a training program, you never know where your graduates are going to end up and what kind of infrastructure and programs they're going to create to divert waste. So, and I'm pleased to just tell you that we are getting ready to announce publicly next week a new Community Composting 101 online certificate course. And it's going to cover in more detail, you know, the what and why of composting, systems, the fundamentals of how to compost, building a compost pile, managing the process, site design and management, and getting started and engaging the community. So we already have got people from 13 cities enrolled. We've been beta testing it. So that'll be available to anyone soon. And I just want to give you a flavor, I've been talking about small scale, not so much some of the bigger scale, but again, there's no one way to do composting. So we cover systems. We go through the key ingredients, which is air, water, your mixing, your recipe of your nitrogen-rich greens with your carbon-rich browns, and what the balances of those will be. We talk about at this community scale what's acceptable and what's not. And by the way, these are available as signs for sites if anybody's interested, and you can customize them if you want to alter what's acceptable or not. We have tips on getting started. We have graphics on how to avoid rodents. We have site management schematics and run you kind of through what you need at a site. And so I'll just wrap it up there. I'll just say this is my last slide besides my contact information, but what you can do, it's not in any particular order, but we talked about reasonable policies and regs. That may be something to start with in Delaware. Of course, if you're not buying finished compost, we say you're not really closing the composting loop or the recycling loop right. Support training, access to land is an issue. Funding for community scale programs is an issue. We need more community scaled equipment and systems. This is screeners for a compost that we built in Baltimore, repurposed from bicycle tire rims. So there's a need for, not everybody wants to build their systems, right? And then there's my contact information. So I'll just leave that up for a second, but back to you, Patty.
Thank you. Does anybody do we want to stop here and have a few questions before I do my local? Bridget, do you want to?
Sure.
Okay, Judy's got her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Judy.
Hi. I definitely want to sign up for the course, and I want to get others on air on that too. So how do I make sure I'm on a list?
Well, I will, Judy, I'll put my contact in the email so folks can feel free to email me directly, but I will definitely let Dee and Bridget and Patty know when that's available on our website to sign up. So let me just get the chat open. Okay.
Go ahead, Shweta.
Brenda, this was just amazing. What a great presentation, great graphics. So I work for a faith-based environmental nonprofit, and we work on climate change every day. And I've been composting for like 5-6 years now in my backyard, and I just can't get to put anything in my trash pile, and then it can be composted. I would love to see it at scale, and I feel like so I have a couple of questions. I want to know how much is that certificate course would be, because we're launching a Sacred Grounds program, which will essentially be, for our faith communities to focus on the land they have, right? And what can they do intentionally with that land, growing pollinator habitats, but also then looking into maybe starting a community scale, like what we can do with our faith groups. So you showed some examples of how some of the congregations have done that. So I'd love to connect with you later to just kind of see what we can do here with our congregations.
Yeah, that Sacred Ground. I love that. That is a great name. And I would love to connect with you. Yeah, so, we're working, there was another Presbyterian church we're working with in Nashville that set up one of those 3-bin systems that's a drop off. And so there's, I have some examples of churches, but really one of the things I just want to emphasize, there's no one way to do this. And one of the beauties of composting is it's a very flexible process. Like, and there's so many different systems, but I do advise, like, start small. And in fact, that church I showed in Baltimore, like they might, at some point, if they're doing well, there's so little risk putting in 3 home composting bins, right? You're not building out a gravel pad, you're not installing this bigger system that they have to maintain. And if they're able to kind of, exercise that composting muscle and get a feel for it, they'll be like, okay, now we need a bigger system. And one of the drivers for that church is when COVID happened, they had a small little garden, but they had tons of land. It was mostly all turf, I mean, and so they were like, we want to expand the garden. People want plots. They want to be outside. And so it was kind of, added the composting in conjunction with expanding their garden and their community of gardeners. So it worked. The timing was really great to do that. And we did it in September, right before the leaves were falling. Oh, by the way, if you're interested in doing more on composting, get all your fall leaves. Don't put any at the curb. You're going to need them all year round for food waste composting.
I do that. I never waste my fall leaves. There's
Yeah.
go for me. So how much is the certificate? Like, does it cost?
Oh yeah, you asked about that. So we have it's $100 per person, but if you have 3 or more, it's reduced. We offer scholarships, so we don't really want to turn anyone away. And so there'll be a link for scholarships or for bundling, but we're happy to work with anybody. Like in Detroit, we're working with a lot of underserved communities, and they've been one of the cities we're beta testing it with, and they've registered like 26 people. Yeah. And so, we've helped if they give us feedback, we've, made some arrangements, let me just say.
Thanks. And my last question would be, what went wrong with Wilmington? I heard about, I kind of heard about it, that there was a facility in Wilmington, which then, there was a lot of community support for it, but it didn't go well.
Well, I think what happened is it was too big. It had capacity for up to 600 tons per day. That is a lot of material. And they was initially done with a kind of private, kind of independent consortium of companies. But then what happened is Waste Management, which is, big trash, big conglomerate that makes more money off landfilling and incinerators, by the way, bought a controlling share of stock and ran that facility into the ground. So they were taking contaminated materials. They were not moving materials off site. They had odor problems. Yeah. And so the article, which I'll put a link into the chat in a second, goes into a lot of that detail. So I think it was too big. Too big, and also the fact that it was run basically by a trash company.
And I think a lot of the material was coming from out of state, and not much of it was coming from inside Delaware. That was one of the other problems, I think.
Oh, absolutely, Richard. I completely concur with that. It was taking material from like a 400-mile radius. So yeah.
Thanks.
I did post the link to that article higher in the chat. So if you guys look, there's a link and it says kind of failure Wilmington, that thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Bridget.
And I do know, Richard, that was a great point because Johns Hopkins had been sending their compost there originally. I used to work there. And American University used to send their stuff there. So like, and I know places from Philly were sending it down there too. So that's a great point. But since then, a lot of these other states in the surrounding areas have found other ways to compost. Fortunately, we have not. So hopefully this will be a good impetus for changing that. Anybody have any other questions before we let Patty just talk about some of the things that she's been working on in Delaware?
Yeah, I just have one question. I'm in Delaware Church. I work with Sweta, and one of our things is developing a grow your own program. And one of the members of my team is a world-renowned expert on industrial size composting. And I like to figure out a way that we can talk with you, Brenda, and think about how we could use some of his expertise in the Delaware area to advance some of the composting in the community.
Yeah.
And of course, continue to work with Shweta and the churches we're working with.
Yeah, and he, you know,
I'll
it
send you a contact email, reach out to you.
okay, sounds good. And I'll just say that no matter what scale you're composting at, you still need the basic ingredients do not change. The oxygen, the moisture, the carbon, nitrogen recipe mixing. So having somebody with knowledge of large scale can help at all scales. So
Oh yeah,
hopefully
he does
yeah.
it. He does it at all scales.
And he might be, yeah.
I'm learning a lot about what I'm not doing right in composting by working with them.
So Brenda, do you partner up with like if in Delaware, if we wanted to do like a pilot project, would ILSR partner with us,
Yeah.
like as a consultant?
Yeah, we do consulting. We're doing that in Nashville. We're doing that in Detroit. I mentioned we've been brought into Philadelphia. You know, we're mostly funded by grants, so you know we do kind of need our time covered, but we also, you know, usually put in some of our own. You know, the grants often don't cover all of our time, so you know, but we would love to work with you.
So, Brenda,
Yes.
Judy, so what would be an obstacle to getting DNREC to start down this path? What's an obstacle to that, and how can we help overcome it?
Well, you all might be in a better position to actually answer that. I'm not, you know, I got a little bit information on the DNREC rules, but I'm not you know, I haven't looked very quick. I mean, they were sent yesterday to me, the permitting regs. So what we did in Maryland, there was really a lack of a regulatory roadmap for any size food waste composter, let alone community scale or farmers. So we went to, I initially approached MDE about doing better permitting, but it got no response. So I went to my own district legislators and asked them to introduce a bill to fix it. They did. Then we got new permitting regs. And I was telling Bridget before we started recording that one of the things we did in Maryland is we made clear that source separated organic materials like yard waste and food waste is no longer, when it's going and flowing to a compost site, it's not considered solid waste anymore. So it doesn't get that, oh, you're not allowed to do this with waste, you're not allowed to do this, because now it's being treated as a resource. So we fixed a lot, but we had to go to elected officials to get the state agency to move. So if you haven't talked to your own delegations, I would say that may be something you want to do.
We're going to be having some conversations with from Plastic Free Delaware with one of our allies from DNREC next week. So we're beginning conversations with them now.
Good, good. And the U.S. Composting Council, the trade industry, has some state permitting guidelines. It's template, and Maryland actually. I worked on those, you know, a decade ago now. They've been updated, I think, several times. But Maryland, we did use them in Maryland. And it's a multi-tiered system. So there's exemptions for small scale sites. There's exemptions for farmers. And so a lot of states have clarity that if you're, even California, if you're on a certain square footage footprint, you don't have to get a permit. At the local level, a lot of, all zoning, as we know, is local. So, there's the state level, and then there's the local level, which is zoning. And so there's in Ohio, the state environment agency took the lead in creating model zoning templates that clarifies that if you're a community garden urban farm, composting is an accessory activity, so you don't need a permit, but but you cannot be a nuisance. So and that's what I prefer. I prefer like performance-based standards. You shall not have rodent problems. You shall not have odor problems. You shall not have stormwater runoff problems. Kind of more performance-based rather than saying you can't sell your compost or distribute it, or you can't do this, or you can't do that, or your system has to be enclosed. There are plenty of open systems that don't have any issues. So why should you say it has to be this or that? Just make sure you set the performance. But anyway, there's a lot of, yeah.
Where do we go for that? That's great information. What could you put in the chat where we could go for that?
I will. And if I can't find the US composting template easily, I'll follow up with Patty. Okay. Okay. So Patty, I know you want to share what you're doing. So.
Well, I have one quick question for you. That's kind of off the wall, but have you heard of anybody, or do you have any experience with composting dog poo? Because where I live, we have tons of we're just dog lovers, and it's a small city, and we have like tons and tons of dog poo bags all over the place. And I had read that in Vancouver at one point, they had created some dog poo composting systems in some of their parks and stuff. Because one of my comments that I used to make was, if we eliminate the plastics in the landfill and we eliminate the compost in the landfill, like here in Newcastle, 100% of our landfill would be, dog poop bags, So I just wanted to know if you'd give a thought to that.
I'm not an expert on that, but absolutely you can compost dog poop. I would just say that waste should go to a commercial scale facility that's making sure it's reaching the high temperatures, that reduce the risk of pathogens. And that's especially important for dog and cat litter, and one of the benefits of composting, it's somewhat of a sanitizing process, and that does reduce animal and plant pathogens, by the way. But you really need to be tracking temperatures and reaching those benchmarks to do that. And also I recommend that compost, even if people want to do it in their backyards, you keep it separate from your other compost that you're going to be putting on your herbs or your growing plants. So, and you really need to know what you're doing. But, the city like San Francisco that has citywide collection of all types of organics, they include dog waste. And they have moved to compostable plastic bags for folks to use to put it in your bin. So you're not introducing plastic into the composting system that won't break down in their commercial scale. And so, and there's other options. There's green cones that you can use in your backyard that I know people have used for, it's more like a solar digester that you don't have to empty, hardly ever at all. I've never used one, but I've heard people have used it for dog waste. So there's options for that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That I have to apologize. I didn't get my presentation up before I started. All right, Bridget, you're going to have to tell me how to go to get my presentation from the screen.
So I made you co-host, so you should be able to, at the bottom of the screen, there should be a button that says share screen.
Right.
In the middle. Go ahead and push that. and it'll open up to whatever your current page is on.
There's also flushable poop bags that you can get, which I use. Patty, can you hear me? It's Cheryl.
Yeah.
There's- Can people hear me?
Yes, Cheryl, it's a little delayed.
Cheryl, it sounds like you're on Quaaludes.
Yeah, I'm not finding how to get to my presentation.
If you want to email it to me, Patty, I can share it.
I'm just going to leave for a second and come right back on because I
Okay.
gotta get, because I am having trouble closing my computer screen off of Zoom to get to my computer
It
activity.
sounds like I'm on Quaaludes.
Sounds good, Patty.
You guys go
Can you
ahead
not
and
hear
talk for a
me?
minute.
I'm happy to take more questions. I just put in the chat two links. One is to the template for state permitting regs that the U.S. Composting Council has developed that I mentioned Maryland is based on. And the second link is we had tracked states that do have exemptions to on-farm composting. So that's there. And
Excellent.
Maryland, I'm going to put next, I'm just going to put that in as the link to the Maryland rules, which I think are pretty good. So.
Sure. While we're waiting for Patty, Brenda, I had a question. Do you have a general idea of how much it kind of costs to get a community composting? Like, I would, whatever, like a generic small size composting off the ground, like the investment.
Well, it can be, there's no one way to do it. So like that one at a church that has 3 home composting bins, like each of those little bins, they cost, less than $100 each. So that was, and then we got, choppers and pitchforks. It's like $500 maybe, you do want pitchforks, choppers, the screener, gloves, temperature probe, but so probably at the minimum, something really small scale like that, you're looking at $500, and that's not paying anybody for their labor. That's kind of, volunteer. The one at the Montgomery County, the Audubon Society with the Eagle Scout, that system is probably $1,000 in materials, a 3-bin system. That doesn't include the gravel pad, but as part of an Eagle Scout project, like he had to raise his own money. So, that's, again, a great example of the power of like harnessing your local volunteers. And I will tell you, that's the second Eagle Scout project I did. It was slightly different design, but both times the scout master who had to approve the project and kind of be involved and be there for the bin builds, they were like, they were different troops, and they were each different years said, this is one of the best Eagle Scout projects I've ever seen. So there's ways, the bigger systems, it's going to run you more money, to do a training program, which is going to be, we're now making it a lot easier, like the online. That's why during COVID, it really underscored the need to do more virtual training. I love being in person. There's nothing to replace building piles together. And one of the things I love to do now is get a bag of raw carrots and put it in the pile at the beginning of a day of training. And then at the end, we pull it out and it's steamed. So like just the hands-on, like showing the how hot it gets in the pile and what it could do, and you're eating the steamed carrots, like that kind of stuff, or we take like clay soil and sandy soil and then soil amended with compost, and we have people pour water through, and so the clay pulls on top, nothing drips, the sand, it all just goes right through. But compost amended soil, like it's drip drip, filtering, holding. I mean, you cannot replace the hands-on with virtual, but we have tried to up our game on the graphics. The next holy grail for us is doing short videos, which we have yet to do, but you know, maybe Delaware, maybe you guys will be our first project where we do like more of that stuff. So I don't know, but yeah, but the training, like, you know, to bring us up to do training, you know, you have to cover our daily rate. But what we try to do is we're big fans of within every community, there's somebody who knows, can teach the soil science part, or somebody like Alan was mentioned already, who's local, who already knows composting 101, who can do it. So you can tap hopefully local people to do the training. So you're not bringing us in, but that we've raised grants like in Atlanta, the group, when we did our training, they raised a grant of 25,000 and we did it over like a 6-week period. So that's a lot of time, a lot of training, you know, and not all of that 25,000 went to the training. We set up some sites too. So, but yeah, if you can raise, like in Philadelphia, they got a $50,000 grant from Comcast, and that paid for them to build a dozen of these 3-bin systems and to do the training.
Yeah,
And they hired like this youth corps group, community power corps or something, to build the bins. So it was so fabulous, the training and the, you know, doing, you know, giving this money to the local people to do it. And I mean,
yeah. Philly's doing some great community projects like that. But I just also want to compliment and maybe ask other people to check out ILSR. I'm a big fan. Like I listen to the podcast, and even for like local energy issues, I think, like, you know, and I love how on your website you can actually see the examples of what other communities are doing, whether it's for community solar or for composting. So I enjoy that podcast in my runs. Listen.
all right, I got to get a quote from you for our next annual report.
Hey, I was wondering if you could let me share my screen for a second, Bridget. I'd like to show you what our scout built for our composting bin.
See?
Or I'll give you 1 second, Linda, and then I'm just getting Patty's stuff up. So
Okay.
let me find you, Linda. All right.
Oh, Linda, I say I need a picture of that so I can put it in my next slideshow.
I'm going to show you right now.
Add it to my power of volunteerism.
There you go.
Oh, see?
Wow.
Wow. Holy
And
smokes.
so he built a 3-bin composting. We put in a rain barrel to keep it so that we can water. He's putting the gutter where we collect the water for the rain barrel. And now we've totally failed since then. We have not produced any compost, but we have an awesome system. So we're learning. So anyways, I will have to say.
And I love that it's in the middle. One of the things about like avoiding rodents, which of course is like the number, when I'm on talk shows and people call in, it's like 90% of the calls have to do with rodents. But rodents love clutter, and often we put our bin against a wall or a fence. It's like the worst place. Think like a hawk, you know, they hate open areas. So I love just seeing this visually. It's in the middle of some space.
Well, maybe we'll get some good information from you. I'll connect with you to make it actually work better. So that's all I wanted to share. Thanks.
Well, Brenda, I would like to give a shout out to Linda and the whole team. I mean, they did a phenomenal job with their community gardening, faith-based community gardening. So they are our heroes for community gardening. So hopefully they can, and they have a composting bin. So we would love to see that expand.
All right, Patty. Excellent.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to have to go down to the second slide for me, please. Okay. So getting back to a little history of, I did a pilot study here in the city of Newcastle, and I was lucky enough to get the Reed House Museum and Gardens, which is managed by the Delaware Historical Society. They gave us a location to start a garden. And then if you would go down to the third slide, that's what they went ahead and they purchased 3 of the DNREC compost bins for us. And we weren't sure how much we needed, but we recruited about 22 households. And here in our community, it's a lot of 1 and 2 people households. So, and the demographics is usually maybe people over 50 living here in town. So there's not very many children. And with the facility that we have easy access to the people 24/7. It's in an enclosed yard with a gate. And it's very common for people to be going on their afternoon or their evening walk, and they will like drop off compost. It's the Reed House has a lot of trees, so we gather the leaves there, but we're also in a residential area in the city where we have a lot of trees along the sidewalks. So we go along there and pick up our leaves too. With those 3 bins, I estimate that we manufacture, if you will, about 150 pounds of compost per year. And then we just let the Reed House Gardens use that. And what we do is we, when our participants join, we give them that DNREC composting guide. And then we give them email updates, but like, so, well, with COVID, I haven't done as much emails and composting communications because we actually wanted to get together. If you show us the next slide, Bridget, please. I apologize for this. So one of the things that happens with us keeping our compost out of the landfill, we have a large area. So when we started the compost bins in 2019, then in 2020, a couple of volunteers and the Reed House sponsored building 12 garden plots. And then one of the things with having it here in the neighborhood that we get to meet our neighbors and socialize a little bit more. I live on one side of the compost bin. I have a friend who lives on the other, and we end up like texting each other, like I'm going to the compost bin. So the other one will, we'll run out and meet each other and talk for 5 or 10 minutes. And so, so that's been really good. And then also with this activity, we've got people who've decided to put a compost bin in their own yard. They were afraid of rodents. They were afraid of smells. They were afraid of insects and that sort of thing. So having them come onto our site and see what's actually going on and how it happens has gotten people to a few people to get their own compost bin, and then that actually lightens up the load for the compost bins that we have. And the other thing, and I think if you go down to the next slide, one of the cons is that it seems like we need to monitor. Well, it takes a certain amount of time to monitor the bins and re-educate and communicate to the people, because like one of the and then I need to recruit and educate compost helpers, and this presentation from Brenda's helped me a whole lot. I've got a lot of good ideas. One of the things that our people do, they don't break down their waste. So this year we've gotten several whole huge pumpkins. We always get corn cobs, and then since we've added the garden plants, we have a lot of the big garden plants at the end of the year that we have to compost and manage, which isn't a problem. And we probably need to add a few more compost bins. And then we occasionally have dog walkers who come in the area that we've asked them not to, but they can't resist our little garden area. And occasionally people will toss a dog poop bag into the bin, but it's easy enough to pull out. And and we hate to get strict and put a lock on the area and keep other people out, because it's nice just to have people come in and use it whenever they can. And then if you want to go to the other slide, and this is kind of the final. So with my next steps, we're going to add more compost bins. I really don't like the plastic ones, but until we can recruit some people to build the wooden ones, and we haven't tried. And then I wanted to say that I see a lot of good food discarded, both from the kitchens and also from the garden plots. People garden and they just let the tomatoes and peppers and produce, die on the vine. So we need to work on food waste prevention at several steps of the way. And then so what I feel like I need to do is with me being part of Plastic Free Delaware and Zero Waste First State, we're going to be working in the short term with the state government for them to tweak their regulations so that it's community friendly, because it's not at this point. And then I think we have to start with our city, county, and state governments to give people incentives, at the household level, the city level, the community level, so on and so forth. And so what I'm going to be doing in the next over the winter is start recruiting the local schools, churches, senior citizen centers to get additional locations so we can expand that. And I'd like to see us come up with maybe Bridget and Trey and other people can help us kind of get some statistics on how many churches, how many schools, et cetera, are composting in Delaware, and then have a baseline statistics and then try to increase that, because from my viewpoint, and I'm sure everybody agrees with me, that if there's approximately 1 million residents in Delaware, and maybe 2 million, but whatever it is, if there every single person should learn to compost as a life skill, and every single person should learn to compost, period, in Delaware, if we're going to help the planet and help our community. So that's the end of my presentation. So I'll take any questions now. So, does anybody have any questions for me or comments?
Patty, I can just share with you and others, since you already have a site that's operating, is that we have that signage. We have 3 sample signs that you can print out. One is a welcome sign that says, "Welcome to this, community food scrap drop off." And then the other one is accept materials, and the third one is drop off instructions, like step 1, step 2, and there's a variety of those. But so we try to think about all the different, like some say lock, but if your bins, like the ones you use, don't have locks on, it says close and secure or something, but they're designed to print out as lawn signs. So you can go to any, like your political posters, and you can, you can just go to any print shop. It's a standard size. You can get the frame that just sticks in the, the cheap metal thing that just sticks in the lawn. So I will send you a link to those if you're interested in, kind of any of those signs.
That would be great. And then I also wanted, I saw one of your slides that had a chopping area. So what?
A what area?
Chopping, it was like a chopping.
Oh, chopping, yeah.
Chopping, like chopping up big debris and that sort of thing. So I was thinking that, I don't know, I'll have to brainstorm about what kind of container we could get. And I guess it's just a shovel or something that people were using, but I can go back and look at that slide.
Yeah, it's actually a sidewalk ice scraper, so that you can buy, probably not in Florida, but
Yeah.
and you should be able to get in your hardware store starting soon or order it. But it's got a flat, blade on a long, and it's just great, unlike a shovel. Just and chop it. And so, if you have an asphalt or concrete pad, you can just chop right on that. But the one at the church, we got them one of those metal galvanized, bins. And the thing is, you just want to put like a bed of wood chips or mulch on the bottom and then the food scraps, because,
You don't want to
if you're
damage
like
the bottom.
me, you don't like to hear the metal on the metal
Oh, yeah.
chalkboard scrape. That's just one of my pet peeves. But yeah, so, and to protect the blade, right? So when you're chopping. But yeah, that's a great thing for a community site, that corn cob, that pineapple top. Yeah.
So,
Brenda, are those signs, I'm on your website, are they on your website?
No,
Oh,
you have
okay.
to have a personal connection.
Wow.
It's just that we're using those in some of the cities, like I mentioned, Philadelphia, Nashville, Detroit. And so they've been out in those cities, Baltimore, because they've brought us into work. But we're trying to get them out in the world. But what we're trying to do is have our signs used at sites that we know are following best management practices, because our logo's on the sign. So we're really trying to foster well-operated community composting sites, which is why we have that guide, Community Composting Done Right, a guide to best management practices. So we're a little bit controlling where our signs end up. So those cities are examples of those that are doing our training and using our training materials. So,
Okay,
but
I sent you an email with the pictures, so you have my email contact. So tell me what I have to do to get
I'll
to-
send you
to
the
do the best to do
yeah.
the best practices though too, because we do want to do that with our garden. So
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
we'll share them with you.
Okay, thanks.
Now we know each other.
So do we have any more questions or comments? Then I guess we can sign off. Brenda, thank you so much for this. It's been so informational, and I'm very excited to get back to the work and get more done and to improve our processes here. And thank you to everybody who joined us. We really appreciate it. And please reach out to us.
I have
with any
one.
thoughts or comments?
I have one other thought, just because of you're so lucky in Delaware to have Longwood, that it could be in some of in New York, like the New York Botanical Gardens, Brooklyn, Queens, the one in the Bronx, a really great training, and they do so many workshops. There may be some partnership available with them to integrate some of this training and composting. So
Okay.
I mean, it just comes to mind because, of course, they're world renowned, right? So, but, there's probably other local resources and places too.
Yeah, we have like Cuba, the Cuba Center. That's
but
might have them.
Bringing them into this process for composting, since that's, they do it seems like they do a variety of training and they're good at it. Could be a way to amplify your work and bring it to a new level. So, and they probably have connections with funders too,
Okay.
Anyway, it just occurred to me as an idea.
That is a good idea. And then that kind of leads me to the thought that with the Delaware Historical Society being supportive of this compost activity, that maybe they would let us look at their other locations and maybe start something there too. So they would and then the Reed House Garden, or the Reed House Museum, does tours for children, school-age children during the year. And I think we had briefly discussed pre-COVID to, have the kids walk over and look at the compost bin and look at the garden plots, as a little bit of additional education for them too.
Yeah.
So.
And if you're ever in New York City, go to Governor's Island. You can take a little ferry. It's a wonderful tourist destination in and of itself. But Earth Matter is there, and they have a composting demonstration site. So they have all the home composting bins to kind of community scale, and it's a great family adventure. You can get on one of the bikes and bike around or walk around. They have glamping there. You can actually stay the night on the island
Oh, wow.
if you have the money for that during the season. But yeah, if you're ever in New York City and you're interested in this, I highly recommend a tour to Earth Matter in Governor's Island.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. Well, good
Okay.
luck, everybody. I look forward to hearing from some of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was
Thank you.
great. Thanks so much.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.